In today's video, a neo-soul and R&B soloing guide for intermediate players. How's it going? I'm Dave and my channel is all about helping you create awesome neo-soul and R&B sounds on your guitar. If that sounds like your kind of thing and you're new here, make sure you hit that subscribe button and you click that notification bell so that you're notified every single time I release a new video. Before we get started with the lesson, I just want to let you know about my book, Chord Charisma. If you're struggling to write unique and original sounding chord progressions, then this book is really gonna help you out. So I've decided to give the first 2 chapters away for free, and in those first 2 chapters, it's gonna show you how to write a basic chord progression and then develop it into something more sophisticated with the use of 7ths, 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths, and they'll really jazz up your chord progressions. So that's completely free. Head down to the description if that sounds like it's for you. Let's jump into the lesson. Today's lesson is a neo-soul and R&B soloing guide for intermediate players. I recently released a beginner's guide, so if any of the concepts or techniques in this lesson are a bit too tricky for you, then make sure you check out the beginner's guide and there'll be some stuff in there for you. So first things first, as an intermediate player, you're gonna need to know all 5 shapes of the pentatonic scale. If you only know the first shape or only know a couple, definitely spend some time learning all 5. So I'm gonna run through all 5 very quickly. There's a timestamp down below if you already know all 5 and you wanna skip the demonstrations of the 5 pentatonic shapes. So let's get started with the first one. We're gonna be playing in the key of A minor. So we're starting at the 5th fret. Here's the second shape. Now I am running through them quite quickly just to save time in the video, so make sure you pause the video and take a look at the neck diagrams, take as long as you need. So this is shape 3. Shape 4. And the final shape, shape 5. And remember the last 2 shapes, shapes 4 and shape 5, can be moved down 12 frets to move them down an octave. So now that we've got that out of the way, let's move on to our first technique, and that is to use chord tones. So in the beginner's soloing guide, I explained that when you're soloing and you want to finish your lick, you want to finish on a root note. So in the key of A minor, you want to finish on the note A. Okay? You're guaranteed to get a resolved sounding lick if you do that. But we can finish on other notes, and the other notes we can finish on are chord tones. So what is a chord tone? Chord tone is very simple. It's just the note that's in the chord that you're playing over. So if we're playing over an A minor chord, the notes are A, C, and E. And as long as we finish our lick on an A, a C, or an E, it will sound pretty good. So let's take the A minor pentatonic scale and find the A's, the C's, and the E's. We're just gonna use shape 1 here. So the A's are at the 5th fret of the E strings and the 7th fret of the D string. Then if we took C, we'd have the 8th fret of both the E strings and the 5th fret of the G string. And for E, we'd have the 7th fret of the A string and the 5th fret of the B string. Now, whenever we're playing over an A minor chord, we can finish on any one of those notes. If we took the chord G, for example, the notes in the chord G are G, B, and D. So let's take a look at where we can find these in the pentatonic scale. So first of all, we're going to take a look at the note G. So G appears at the 8th fret of the B string and the 5th fret of the D string. We're going to skip B for a second and move to D. So D appears on the 5th fret of the A string and the 7th fret of the G string. Now the reason I skipped B is because it's not in the pentatonic scale. Now this is where we can start adding notes that are outside of our pentatonic scale and start expanding our playing a little bit more. So all the B's that are in this sort of area, in our shape 1 area, are at the 4th fret of the G string and the 7th fret of both E strings. So whenever there's a G, you can either hang on to a B, a D, or a G for longer than usual, and it will sound good because you're playing over a G chord which has all of those notes. So let's take a look at an example that I've created. So this example is broken down into 2 similar licks, and in the first lick, we're finishing over an A minor. So I decided to land on an E and finish on an E there, as E is one of the chord tones. And then the second lick, we finish on an A minor again. So I decided to finish the lick on a C, which is also a chord tone. So take a listen. Technique number 2 is intervals. Now, in the first video, I explained that we could use double stops in our solo where we use 2 notes at the same time, and it just adds a bit more variety to our solos, but I didn't break down the specific intervals that sound the best. So I'm going to do that now. My favorite intervals to use in soloing are thirds, fourths, and sixths. So let's start off with thirds. I'm going to show you how you can play all the thirds in the key of A minor on the G and B strings. So you can use that as a starting point, but you definitely want to try and figure out what they are on all the other string sets. So definitely do that, but let's start off with thirds on the G and B strings. Okay, so we've got fret 2 and fret 1 on the G and B strings. Then we've got 4 and 3. Then we've got 5 and 5. Then we've got 7 and 6. Then we've got 9 and 8. Then we've got 10 and 10. 12 and 12. And then you can repeat that sequence an octave up, starting at the 14th fret, 14 and 13, and so on. Let's take a look at a lick where I used a lot of third intervals. The next interval is fourths. I really like using fourths in my soloing. Again, I'm going to show you how to play the fourths on the G and B strings, but again, you want to learn them all over the fretboard. In the key of A minor, our fourths are the open G and first fret on the B string. Then we've got 2 and 3, 4 and 5, 5 and 6, 7 and 8, 9 and 10, 10 and 12, bigger gap here. And then we can start again, starting at the 12th fret and 13th fret. So take a listen to a lick where I used a lot of fourth intervals. The final interval that we're going to be taking a look at is sixths. I really like sixths. They're my favorite of these intervals just because they sound so gorgeous. Okay, so let's take a look at the sixth intervals on the D and B strings. Again, I know I'm repeating myself, learn them on all the string sets as it's really useful. Open and open, 2 and 1, 3 and 3, 5 and 5, 7 and 6, 9 and 8, 10 and 10, 12 and 12, and then we can, well, that's where we start again. So take a listen to a lick that I've written using a lot of sixth intervals. Okay, so the third technique in this video is odd note groupings. This technique is really going to help with those speedy lead runs as they're going to create unexpected and unique sounds. What we're going to do is we're going to play notes in groupings of a number that's different to what the note value would suggest. Now, what I mean by that is if we were playing 16th notes, you'd expect notes to be grouped in like 4 sets of 4. But what we can do is we can play 16th notes and maybe group the notes into 3s or 5s. And that just totally throws things off a little bit and sounds really cool. If I played 16th notes and grouped them into 3, we'd get something that sounds like this. All right, so I accented every beat there so you could hear where the 16th notes were being played, but I just grouped them into 3s. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. All right. Now, if you're still struggling to understand, it might be best to just hear it in a lick. So I've written a lick here where I'm playing 16th notes. There's a bit of a triplet feel with these 16th notes. Okay, but I've grouped things into 5. So what I'm doing is I'm just descending shape 1 and I'm playing 5 notes. Then I'm descending shape 2, playing 5 notes. Descending shape 3, and playing 5 notes. And you'll hear we've got a really interesting sound. Take a listen. Now, we don't have to do this with just 16th notes. We could do this with triplets. Now, triplets, obviously, you would want to group in 3s. But we can maybe group them into 4s. So if we're playing triplets, but playing groups of 4, we could get a really interesting sound. And I've written a lick where I do just that. So take a listen. Okay, so now this part of the video, we're going to move less into the theory side of things and more into the technique side of things. The fourth technique is slide vibrato. So slide vibrato is a really awesome technique. If your solos and your lead playing is lacking feeling and expression and emotion, then this is going to be one of those techniques that really brings that sort of thing into your solos, okay? So let me show you how slide vibrato is applied. So say we're playing the 7th fret of the G string. Yeah, we could do a standard vibrato like that, but we could also slide up and down like this and get a vibrato sound. So now there's a few keys to this. We've got to do it really, really quickly. We want to emphasize this 7th fret. We don't want to be hanging around on this 8th fret too long, okay? Now, what you can also do is you can take your thumb off the back of the neck. It makes it easier to slide, in my opinion. It might not for some people, but give it a go. And also try and keep the movement as small as possible. You don't want to be moving from one side over here, all the way over here, all the way over here. You want it to be nice and small. So like that. Now take a listen to a lick where I use some slide vibrato. We're going to go further into slide vibrato now, but here's a basic lick using some slide vibrato. Now we can also do slide vibrato with double stops. We're just going to use 2 fingers now instead. I've written a lick using slide vibrato for double stops, so take a listen. Now a really awesome sound is when you can apply slide vibrato to a bend. So if we're bending the 7th fret up to the pitch of the 9th fret, and then we can do a slide vibrato and then maybe play the 5th fret of the G string. Yeah, it sounds really, really nice. So take a listen to a lick where I've done just that. The final technique is the chord quake. I've spoken about this in previous videos before. It's a very neosoul style technique. Now, we usually apply this to chords. You can do chords in your solos, so it's definitely worth learning this technique. So let's apply this to a D major 9 chord. This is how you play a D major 9 chord. 5 on the A, 4 on the D, 6 on the G, and 5 on the B. Now what we're going to do is we're going to play each note one at a time. But when we play each note, we're going to drop down a fret and then come back up a fret. We're going to slide down and slide back up. So just like that. Okay, then the next note. Then the next note. And then the next note. Now the key here is to keep all the notes ringing out even after you've quaked them. Practice it slowly, maybe even use a metronome. I would suggest using a metronome actually, and see if you can speed it up a little bit. Now I would suggest when you're using the chord quake in your solos, use triads. It's good to learn triads. I've done a video on triads if you want to learn all of your triads. So for example, if the chord progression was A minor, F and G, we could play an A minor triad, 5-5-5 on the top 3 strings, an F triad, 5-6-5, and then a G triad, 7-8-7. And we get something that sounds a little bit like this. Okay, so that's a very basic example. You don't want to overdo it. You only want to sprinkle it into your solos every now and again, as it makes it more special and exciting when you use it rarely, okay? Same thing with all of the techniques that you learn in solos. You want to just sprinkle them in there. You don't want to overdo them. So let's take a listen to the final example in this video where I use the chord quake in a soloing context. So that is today's video, an intermediate neo-soul and R&B soloing guide. If you enjoyed the video, click the like button. Let me know what you thought in the comments. Do you want to see an advanced soloing guide? Let me know in the comments if you do. Also subscribe to the channel if you haven't done so already. Now just one more reminder, my book Chord Charisma, I'm offering the first 2 chapters for free down in the description. Again, you're going to learn how to create a basic chord progression, learn the functions of each chord in a key, so you know which order to put chords in, and then I'll show you how to add 7ths, 9ths, 11ths, and 13ths to those chords to make them sound more sophisticated, more jazzy. Definitely check that out. Now, if you enjoyed this video and you want to learn some licks now using some of these techniques, check out this video, lots of licks there, and I'll see you there. Have a good one.